Hello everyone, my name is Prabh Nair and I'm working as a chief instructor at InfoSec Training.
Hi, team. Welcome to the session on Coffee with Prabh. And today we have a special guest, Mr. Muneeb Imran Shaikh. Mr. Muneeb Imran Sheikh there's no need of his introduction because his work we can see in the ISACA journals. He wrote several blogs on the risk and enterprise risk management. And the best thing about those content is more mapped with the case studies. It is really a great honor for us to have Mr. Muneeb Imran in this session. And I'm sure from this particular session, you get a great insight on the information security and privacy risk assessment. So this session is more about how to conduct privacy risk assessment in the organizations. We haven't seen such content on YouTube, and when I reach out to Imran, and Mr. Imran was very happy to share their initiatives on the privacy risk assessment. And about the contribution of Mr. Muneeb. Muneeb is basically having a 15 years of experience in the information security and enterprise governance, and currently he's working as a lead in one of the firm in Saudi. And Mr. Imran, Mr. Muneeb, thanks for taking out the time for this particular session, and I'm sure it will be a great session for the aspirants who looking forward for the career in the privacy risk. Thanks, Muneeb bhai.
Thank you, Prab, for having me on your show. It's a pleasure being on the show, and I look forward to contributing in my humble capacity.
Thanks, Munibai. Munibai, before going to start the today topic, if it's possible, to share your journey about how you started your career, because might be this video can be can be a great video for the aspirants who want to make the career in the data privacy or enterprise risk governance or information security governance. So, what was your perspective behind this initiatives? Because I can see a lot of transition in your career. Yeah.
Yes. I started off my career from Pakistan, and where I actually started from the telecommunication background. I
Wow.
served in the telecommunication industry for more than a long for a significant period of my career, and then I transitioned towards the cybersecurity or the information security in particular. But having the application software development and IT, background, even the telecom sector, my focus was more towards the application software development side and towards the network infrastructure. So that gave me an idea that how it linked with the information security aspect. So few years earlier I had started to realize that information security is a big challenge that is going to be that needs to be tackled by not just by the governments but the organizations, by the private organizations. So I started to transition from there onwards, and since then I have been just continuously updating myself, upgrading my skills, and that's what I've enjoyed in past few years. Besides the certifications, I have contributed with various articles. Some of these are mentioned over here, which I have contributed at ISACA and some other platforms as well. There are two papers that I have written, and I've been part of various other podcast appearances as well. So, what I believe in is that whatever learnings that we have, we must contribute it back, and this is what I'm trying to do.
I'm one of a great follower of one of the article of this, which is called how the CISO can build the support from senior management. That is one of the best article I have seen in Isaka, and that make me that inspire me to reach out to you to see. Like I was just doing my guess whether you can basically part of the session, because to have you in this session, it is really great honor for me, to be frank. I never thought that you're taking out the time for the session. But yes, one of your best article was this, how the CISO can build support. And the second best article I like about your the enterprise risk management for Isaka, which you wrote. That's one of the best article I have seen, which give the practical insight about the risk functions and all that.
I'm humbled.
So Munibai, if you're talking about the future aspirants who want to make a career in the risk management or privacy and all that, what is the common statement you want to give them? What is a suggestion for them on a high level? What motivates you to upgrade yourself? Because you know all the certifications, you have the knowledge and all that, but you're still updating yourself. You're sharing the content. You're making a journals. You're taking all the time. So what make you inspire to go for such kind of a contents? Yeah.
Look, I firmly believe that the world has consistently transitioned from time to time period, and if we have an eyesight on the future and what are going to be the future challenges of the world, what are the challenges that different states are going to face with regards to their future, then we'll be able to really understand that how we can equip ourselves to serve those needs. If we
True.
ourselves have a sense of the future, we'll be able to align ourselves with the objectives of various states and the organizations and the world at large. If we have this sense, then it will give us the opportunity to first identify that what exactly is needed, and then equipping ourselves. So I had started to realize that now, with the increasing digital transformation that has been going on in the world, what has happened is that all the data that was lying down on the files earlier on in the form of unstructured data, it has now become structured.
Great.
And with this structured data, there is an amazing capability to and the computational powers that the organization and the states that have now, what it
True.
has done is that it has allowed organizations to turn this data into massive intelligence. You can
Exactly.
identify so much about human behavior that the person himself or herself may not know about. So
True.
therefore, there are things. So within these, there are privacy risks as well. And
Mm-hmm.
these privacy risks are not just, I mean, they do not need to be seen only as part of the privacy risks. They need to be seen in terms of the public policy.
True.
How this data can be used to influence the behavior of the individuals within a country, and these data sets, all this intelligence that is being extracted out of that data, how this intelligence can be used to maintain a financial equilibrium within the country, and to drive certain policies. So therefore, I feel that privacy in itself is one aspect that helps to map the state level requirements.
Great.
And if anyone intends to come towards the privacy side, see, the thing is that there are primarily two entry points to privacy. There are usually, if you see that individuals are either coming from the legal background, or they are coming from the technical, from the IT background. Those individuals who have and who have the background from the IT side, or let's say software development, network infrastructure, they have to cover one missing link, which is the legal side. They have to understand the
True.
legal aspect, because legal aspect is heavily involved in privacy.
True.
Okay, so
True.
if they cover this up, they are in a reasonably good shape to equip themselves to perform the privacy related function. However, those individuals who are coming from the legal side, in my opinion, they have far more things to cover up, because unfortunately, they may not have dealt with the software development side. They may not be familiar with the
IT.
information technology aspect at all. So for
Security
them,
controls. Yeah.
it's a much bigger challenge. Yes, they do understand the legal aspect of it. They do understand the jurisdictions, and how different laws play out with respect to the jurisdictions, and how what is going to be the interpretation of various laws. But again, the technical aspect of it, where privacy needs to be operationalized, that is something which is a challenge for them. But again, these gaps can still be bridged. That's not really a big challenge. So
True.
these are the two avenues which new individuals can exploit to enter into privacy side.
So that is why Munib, like as you also raised this input, is that we can have a session on privacy risk assessment. So let's understand about so Munib, like if you want to conduct, everyone know about risk assessment, how we conduct a risk assessment, but there's a new trend
Hmm.
is which is happening is how to conduct privacy risk assessment in the organization. Okay, because in some companies, we in some regulation they say called as a PIA. Correct me if I'm wrong, which is called privacy impact assessment. Some say DPIA, data privacy impact assessment, and now there's a new trend, new thing is emerges called as a privacy risk assessment. So if I'm joining as a consultant in a company and company has given me tasks that okay, yes, we are a company, we're going to be comply with any GDPR perspective or PIPDA or HIPAA and all that. So in that, the one thing we do the PIA or privacy impact or privacy risk assessment. So Munibhai, how we conduct privacy impact assessment in the organization from zero? Like if I want to start from scratch.
See, there is a one of the challenges in privacy is that privacy is still an evolving field. The linkages between various similar concepts has not been further ironed out. There are areas which need to be ironed out for any kind of confusion. Right now, there is a significant amount of confusion because often different legal jurisdictions are using different terminologies
Mm,
for similar concepts. I mean, let's
mm,
take the example of data processors or data controllers. So, what we are considering as data processors and data controllers in GDPR, CCPA uses completely different terms for similar things.
yes.
However, when it comes to privacy risk management and privacy impact assessment, these are very closely, coordinated concepts. So, privacy impact assessment is supposed to be performed once any risk which is identified is of high or very or above than higher level. Okay,
Okay.
that's the linkage between the privacy impact assessment and the privacy risk management. And privacy impact assessment is more of a detailed assessment that needs to be carried out onto that process or onto that information security or onto that information program or on that particular product. But I mean, even in the PIA, you are essentially performing a risk assessment. But again, on a more detailed level, you have more artifacts on your
Mm.
table which need to be examined, and then you have to, pluck the privacy risks related to that program, product, or related to that, infrastructure as well.
Okay. So what is the first step normally? Like, if I want to start a PI in the company, any consultant or any person after from this video, if he want to perform the PIA, so what is the first step?
So I would rather focus on the privacy risk assessment, and within that, I will club the privacy impact
Great.
assessment as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so see, the fundamentals don't really change. So this is how a privacy risk management framework or privacy risk management phases usually pan out. And if you see,
Hmm.
this part has been taken from ISO 27005, which is
Yes.
risk management framework related to information
Information
security. So the
security risk management.
fundamental
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the fundamentals don't really change. Okay,
Okay.
the fundamentals remain the same whether you're doing it for information security or you're doing it for privacy. The fundamentals still stay the same. That you first have to lay down a context. Okay, and then you have to perform a risk assessment, and then you have to treat that risk, and you have to monitor it, and you have to control it, communicate it to the respective stakeholders as well. Now, what goes into these aspects, this is something that we can talk about in detail. So let's
Excellent.
move into the next phase, which is the context establishment, where the first thing that you have to do is that you have to establish the context in which your company is operating. And when I talk about the context establishment, it includes at least these areas which need to be covered. The first thing is that what are the global trends associated with privacy? What are the laws and the standards that are being developed globally? And then you have to see that, okay, do you have any relevance with, or do you have any compulsion, or do you sense that there might be any compulsion going forward to comply with some laws and the regulations that might be under development or that might be enforced in coming years by a certain country. Let's take the example of GDPR. Let's say if you are an airline, okay, and even if so, let's say if you are operating only in Asia, if you are an airline for, let's say, in UAE, but if you have your business even in Europe, then you may have the compulsion to comply with GDPR because you will be processing a lot of data of the European citizens and the residents over there.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
then the second thing is the industrial aspect, that you might be operating in the industry which has certain laws and regulations with which you may have to comply with. Okay,
True.
so those things need to be taken into account. Then the third is specifically related to the company, that what are the local laws or the global laws or the regulations or the standards that your organization has to comply with. So you have to distill these requirements coming from the global, from the industrial aspect, and from your internal organizational aspect as well, that how these things can impact your privacy operations or business operations at large. Once you
Okay.
distill these things, then you have to develop an appetite statement, your privacy appetite statement, which needs to be aligned with your enterprise appetite statement as well, that how
Okay.
much of the privacy risk can your organization absorb. And
So Munim,
again,
who
this needs
decide this appetite? Who decide this appetite? Sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry
yeah,
for that.
this has to be decided by the board of directors or by the board of
Okay.
governors.
Okay.
Okay, because they are the ones who are setting the tones. They are the ones who have to decide that, because they are also responsible for setting the tone for the enterprise risk management. They are the ones who set the enterprise risk appetite as well. So within the enterprise risk appetite, one of the appetite statements will be associated with the privacy as well. So they will be the ones who will be making a call on privacy risk
Great.
appetite as well.
Okay.
Okay, and then you have to put forward your risk acceptance criteria, that what are the risks, what are the levels of risk that your organization would be willing to accept, whether you'll be
Okay.
able to accept low risks or very low risks, or you want any risks which are of medium and above. They need to be treated and further mitigated. And then you need to set out a risk evaluation criteria. When I talk about the risk evaluation criteria, it means that you may have a risk register which may be populated immensely, which may have, let's say, hundreds of risks. Does your organization have the capacity and the budget to treat all those risks? The answer is no. No
No.
organization has the capacity to treat all the risks. So it has to lay down a risk evaluation criteria where only certain risks beyond a specific risk level need to be treated. Below that risk level, those risks can be accepted either through documented justification or without any documented justification. But the risk evaluation criteria just spells out that what are the levels of risks that your organization will further evaluate, and then it will decide to treat them.
So,
Okay.
Munibai, like when you talk about risk evaluation criteria, any example like you would like to suggest, like like we say some kind of a benchmark or KPI we basically set. So, do we have any risk evaluation criteria for that? Like, okay, this is a low risk, this is the high risk. Do we have some kind of a benchmark we set in the company?
See, the thing is that these benchmarks or these risk levels should funnel down from your enterprise risk management. So your
Okay.
enterprise risk management must have had various levels of risk. How does it classify as a very high risk, or as a critical risk,
Hmm.
as a
Hmm.
high risk, as a medium risk, as a very low, or as a, let's say, insignificant risk? Okay,
Okay.
so you will have to map your privacy risks on those levels, but again, the tone and the tenor of those levels need to be aligned with privacy. They need to be written in a manner which demonstrate that these are privacy oriented risks. That's one thing. So once you perform the risk assessment, once you start performing a risk analysis, after you have performed your risk analysis, and I will further elaborate on this going forward. Once you have performed the risk analysis and you have populated a risks register which has, let's say, 100 risks,
Hmm.
if within that risk register you are seeing that within those 100 risks you have 30 risks which are of your low and very low levels, your risk evaluation criteria might say that any risks which are of low or very low levels, they may not need to be treated any further. They need to be just accepted as is. But any risks which are above the category of, or above the level of low levels, then they need to be further evaluated to see whether so what to make sure that we treat them properly, whether we need to abandon those activities, whether we need to transfer those risks, whether we need to accept them as is, or whether we need to mitigate them or reduce them further. So this is something that goes on into your risk evaluation criteria.
Great.
Okay.
Okay.
So the first thing in the risk management exercise for privacy risk management is the risk identification, where you have to perform the
Identify
risk
the PI.
identification. Yeah. So there are various phases in the risk identification. So before I go towards these phases, what I often suggest is that, you see, more or less this is the life cycle that you're seeing on the right hand side for a data flow. Okay, the data
Yeah.
is created, then the data is either stored, used, shared, archived, and then it's destroyed.
Hmm.
So whenever you embark on a journey to conduct a privacy risk assessment exercise, okay, you should first identify the flow of that data, how that data is being created. When I talk about the
Excellent
creation
point.
part, so you have to understand from the business owners, or from the potential risk owners, that what is the flow of that data, why you are collecting that data in the first place. Is there
Why
any
is
legal
important? Yeah.
obligation behind that? Is there any business obligation behind that? Is there any regulatory obligation behind that? You need to identify these areas. Okay, and once you have identified that, then you have to assess that, okay, does that business process or that product have a mechanism to offer a choice and take the consent on the collection of that data? And is the reason of processing that data communicated to the consumers or to the end users through the privacy notice? So this needs to be first identified. Okay. And then, so whatever risk scenarios that you will identify, they need to be mapped out to these various phases of the data life cycle. So once
Okay.
you start identifying the risk scenarios, the first thing that you have to identify is the pie. What kind of pie are you dealing with? So let's say if you're dealing with just the names and the IDs, then it's just a pie. But imagine if you're dealing with the sensitive pie, let's say with the medical information, okay,
Mm-hmm.
or let's say with the religious beliefs, or let's say with the political beliefs or with their associations, that that is part of the sensitive pie. So then again, right from here, you will have to start identifying that, okay, since you're dealing with the sensitive pie, so your risk assessment needs to be conducted in accordance, considering that this data that you're dealing with is not just the pie, it's the sensitive pie. Then the next
Okay.
thing that you have to perform is that what are the threats related to that pie? Okay. I'll give you an example. Let's say if your organization is collecting the data and if it is
Mm-hmm.
not giving a choice and consent to uh, to the end users, there is a threat that the users might contest that their data was taken, it was processed,
The wrong manner.
in an unlawful manner. Okay, that's one of the threat. Then you have to identify the vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities could be the lack of adequate controls, which is again not having a privacy control. Privacy notice is is the lack of an existing
Control.
control, because privacy notice is one avenue through which you dispense the data subject rights. You inform the end users that why their data is being processed, why their data has been collected, and where do we store that, to whom with whom do we share all that data.
Mm-hmm.
You get my point? And
Yes.
then the next thing that you have to identify is the impact, that what kind of impact would it have on your organization? Would it have
Okay.
financial impact? Would it have a reputational loss? Would it have an opportunity loss? Would it result into penalties? Now there is another thing, which is that sometimes there is a financial loss and there is a reputational loss as well, and there is an opportunity loss as well. So the question is that which loss needs to be identified, which, so what will you consider uh, uh, as the loss? So sometimes what happens is that there is a there is a primary adverse impact and there is a secondary adverse impact. Okay,
Okay.
I'll give you an example. If your organization is processing the data of your employees, okay, let's say it's processing the salary information, okay, and this processing does not come under any regulatory umbrella. Okay, you're just processing this data for the sake of of pursuing your business interest. Imagine if this data is lost or it's leaked. Okay, you may not be subjected to any, so the first adverse impact it would have would be the opportunity loss.
True.
But because of this opportunity loss, your organization will be subjected to a financial loss as well, and even
True.
a reputational loss amongst your internal employees, that your systems were not adequate enough to protect the personal data of you of the organizational employees. So this is how it needs to be selected. One more important aspect is that once you are identifying that, during this phase you have to develop the taxonomies related to the threats to the pie and the vulnerabilities. Okay,
Okay.
so you need to have a list of threats, and you have to have a list of vulnerabilities associated with the pie. And as I mentioned that, once you are identifying the risk scenarios, you have to identify the risk scenarios based on these phases. That once
Okay.
the data was collected, were the users given a choice and consent? Were they displayed the privacy notice? Where is that data being stored? Okay, how long is that data being stored? Is that data being stored in alignment with the data retention requirements? What are the data retention requirements associated with those laws or the regulations? Okay, and who has access to that data? Is that data being disclosed with some other party? Okay, how long are you going to keep that data into the archive? Again, if you're keeping that data into the archive for a longer period, does that lead to any
Overall.
non-compliance status, and how that data is being destroyed. So the risk scenarios need to be created by considering this entire data life cycle.
So
Okay.
risk scenario is basically created once you basically have a PI information, threats, vulnerabilities, and their possible impact. Because risk scenario is all about the probabilities that we are creating.
Yeah, so I would first understand the process. Okay. And there could be a risk scenario which so it may be the case that within all the remaining phases data is being processed properly, but there might be a risk scenario only with regards to the creation or the collection of the data. So you will
Understood.
only create a risk scenario with related to that particular phase, and then you will start develop. So once you develop a risk scenario, then you will identify the threats related to that risk scenario. Okay.
Okay.
Then you will identify the vulnerabilities related to that risk
Threat
scenario,
scenario. Risk
and
scenario.
what will be the impact once that risk materializes.
Okay.
Okay.
Fine.
Then as we move on, the next is to identify the likelihood and the impact. And again, remember that this likelihood and the impact levels need to be aligned with your enterprise risk management skills. So the idea is that you should be speaking the same language. So let's say if we are saying something that a particular risk is of a critical nature,
Hmm.
then the individual sitting at the enterprise level or at the board level, they should have the same understanding of what constitutes as a critical risk.
Okay.
Okay. So in this phase, you perform a likelihood and the impact. And again, the definitions for the likelihood and the impact need to be ironed out. They need to be laid down. Right now, the question comes over here whether the organization would engage into a quantitative risk analysis or a qualitative risk analysis or a semi-quantitative analysis. In my opinion, I think privacy is at a phase where performing a quantitative risk analysis is extremely difficult. I mean, because we do not
True.
have the raw data. I mean, even if you are able to develop some kind of a formula, but again, the raw data which is needed to perform a quantitative risk analysis, that is not representative enough. So therefore, I am of the view that if we have the likelihood and the impact levels which are defined in a more objective manner, then it will still serve the purpose of conducting a risk analysis.
Okay.
So from the first phase, which was of risk identification, you would have had various risk scenarios. Now
Hmm.
those risk scenarios need to be populated by, so each risk scenario need to be assessed in terms of likelihood and impact. That, let's say if the organization is collecting the data and it has not provided the choice and consent to the end users, then and if the risk scenario says that this data might be processed in an unlawful manner, what is the
Hmm.
likelihood of that data being processed in an unlawful manner, and what is going to be the impact, okay, of that data being processed. Now what would be the impact to the data subjects? We are talking about the impact to the data subjects. Okay. The data, the initial, this part where I mentioned the identification of impact, this impact was more about the impact on the organization. Okay.
Okay.
But when we are assessing the impact over here, this is the impact on the data subject itself.
Okay.
Okay.
So
And
likelihood
in
is
the
all
risk
about the
analysis,
event, right? Muneeb, likelihood is all about the event, which is basically a probability of occur, like because collecting the information without notice, what is the likelihood of this activity is happening, like 4 times in a day or 4 times in a year or four
absolutely,
times. So
absolutely,
when,
yes,
when
yes,
we'll
yes,
calculate the impact of each and every, so here we considering the ALE values or on all that quantitative, as I said, quantitative value we are not considering here. But if something need
yes.
to be mapped with the monetary functions and all that, do we need to add the ALE values with that? Because when we go by the generic risk formulations, we have like cost of occurrence, cost of impact, and cost of likelihood. So are we considering that factor here or?
No, look, at this point in time, I still believe that privacy is still in the infancy stage. So having those numbers, I mean, reaching out for ALE values, the thing is that ALE values is also predicated on various other values. The thing is
Hmm.
that unless you have those values, you won't be able to, calculate your ALE as well. So
True.
therefore, and since privacy is right now still in the infancy stage, so therefore, I still am of the view that conducting a qualitative analysis at least puts us into a position where we are able to identify those gaps, or identify those risks. But I do not see that privacy risks can be quantitatively measured at this point in time.
Understood. Understood. And if they have a past data with us about, regulatory fines and, the processing of the data and all that, then in that case, it is feasible. Can we say like that? Like,
Yes, it could be feasible. My concern is predicated on the point that if
integrity
you
of
have
data.
a data, but if it's not representative enough, if that
Yeah.
data is not good enough to cover the entire risk landscape, then
Mm,
your entire risk assessment exercise may be very futile, or it may be
exactly.
very narrow in nature. So that's
Yeah.
my concern. So as we move forward, and probably in coming years, as the privacy itself as a subject matures, I think we'll have substantial data which is representative enough to map out all these areas.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Fine.
One very important point is that within risk analysis phase, you first need to identify the inherent risk, okay, which is identified without factoring in the application of any controls. You are not applying any
Okay.
controls, and then you are determining the risk levels.
Okay.
Okay. And once you have done that, then you move towards the risk evaluation phase. So in the risk evaluation phase, all the risks need to be evaluated based on the risk evaluation criteria, which you had laid down in the context establishment phase. Okay.
Understood. Map with
So
that criteria.
yeah. So if your risk evaluation criteria says that your low risks do not need any further treatment, then those risks can be, simply accepted. They can be so accepted with documented justification or without documented justification. However, the thing is that those risks that you have accepted without any further treatment, they still need to be monitored, because those risks may they may increase in their magnitude,
True.
and they may go on to become from low risk to medium
High
or
risk, medium.
high.
That's why we're introducing a
Yeah.
KRIs for that. So by which proactively we can monitor based
Yes,
on that.
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Then the next is the risk treatment. So once you have identified that what are the risks that need to be evaluated, then you can uh, start determining that so from here onwards you can determine that which risks need further treatment. And when I talk
Okay.
about the treatment, it means that which risks or which risk scenarios lead into an activity which need to be abandoned or avoided completely, which risks need to be transferred, and which risks can be accepted after mitigation. Once you have evaluated the risks, what becomes evident is that you need certain risks to be treated. Okay.
True.
So the risks which had to be accepted, you would have accepted them already in the previous phase. But by this point in time, you would have certain risks which need to be either accepted, which need to be further reduced, transferred, or avoided. Once you reduce them, yes, then, and once they are within your risk acceptance criteria, then you can accept them. Okay.
Okay.
So at this point in time in the risk treatment exercise, you are implementing your controls to see that your
Okay.
residual risk now is within your acceptable levels. Okay.
Okay.
So it might be the case. So let's go back to the example that I gave earlier, that if your organization was collecting the information, collecting the personal data, and it was not offering the choice and consent, there was a risk scenario of data being processed in an unlawful manner. Okay. If your organization flags it as a medium risk, so according to your risk evaluation criteria, you may require this risk scenario to be treated further, which can be either to mitigate it or to completely shun the activities of collecting that personal data. So let's say if you institute a choice and consent mechanism in your organization, what you are doing is that you are essentially mitigating that risk by informing the users why that data is being processed, and by
Exactly.
also making sure that that data which has been collected, it is not used for any other purpose other than what was stated into the privacy notice. Okay. So this
And
is
not
how
collecting
you
the information is lead to the avoidance. Not collecting the information or not involved in that business to collect the information lead to the avoidance.
yes, yes, yes. But if you have instituted a mechanism where you have informed the users why the data was collected, okay, then what you're trying to do is that you are trying to mitigate that risk. And
Excellent
secondly,
point.
if you have
Yeah.
instituted a mechanism where that data is not being used for any other purpose, then even from by doing this, you are mitigating the risk. You are further
Okay.
reducing the risk. Once this risk is reduced, let's say from medium to low or very low level, then this
You'll
risk
accept.
can be accepted. Okay,
True.
and then this needs to be monitored further.
Further,
So
yeah.
the last thing, which is the risk monitoring and reporting. So once you have treated all the risks, those risks need to be recorded into the risk register, and whatever risks need to be accepted, so there has to be a separate mechanism or a separate risk acceptance form, which needs to be signed by the risk owners. And all the progress for the risks which are highlighted, or all the risks associated with privacy, they need to be reported to the respective stakeholders. Now these respective stakeholders can be your chief risk officer, your
Hmm.
enterprise risk management committee.
Hmm.
Okay, it can be your other oversight committees to whom the data privacy might be reporting to. So these are the committees to where you have to communicate these privacy risks, and whether you communicate it in terms of the risk heat map, or you communicate them in a table format. Again, it's a separate discussion. uh, it's your choice, but again, the point is that all the risks that you have identified, they need to be reported to the relevant stakeholders as well.
Great.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
that's about it. If you have any questions, please, I'll be more than happy to discuss them.
Thanks, Muni bhai. Thank you so much. I also got a great insight about the privacy risk assessment. I had some different assumption about the privacy risk assessment, but the example like you gave us about the treatment approach and all that cleared my doubt about how to take it further. So um, so this documentation, what do you think about in the future? Like, who going to lead this kind of a profiles? Will we lead by the risk governance, risk managers, or we going to enhance the data privacy profiles to on a risk management? They will do the core DPI, because most of the audience of the privacy experts are lawyers, or they are from a corporate institution. So how you see yourself, how you see this privacy risk assessor kind of a profile in future?
You see, I have observed that privacy is an area which is usually tilted in the favor, or it's resting under the umbrella of legal section right now,
Hmm.
most of the organizations. However, the challenge that I see is that individuals who are from the legal background, no disrespect to them, the thing is that they are very strong in the jurisdiction part. They're all very strong in the regulations and the legal aspect of it. But they have been raised to understand the legal aspects of the issues, but they may not understand the technical aspect of it, where the privacy needs to be operationalized. So if those individuals do not understand the difference between the data archival and the data being rested on, or let's say data backup, the thing is that these individuals may feel lost. That's my contention. So individuals who are coming from the technical side, and if they equip themselves to understand the legal aspect of it, the jurisdiction, the various jurisdictions in which their organization is operating,
Hmm.
or the various laws. Yes, you may still need individuals from the legal side to provide the interpretation of those laws. I still
Okay,
believe that the interpretation should be left to the legal individuals. That should not be
understood.
done by individuals who are coming from the technical background, because those
Okay,
technical individuals may not be well versed in performing the interpretation. That interpretation should rest with the legal side. However, the implementation part of it should be completely with the privacy side. And I feel that risk is one of the departments within various organizations, which is, in my opinion, the best avenue where the privacy can be taken care of. Other
okay,
units, either will move data privacy onto the back burner, or even in the legal. The challenge with the legal aspect is that, see, the attorneys and the lawyers, they they don't just have to worry about privacy. They have to worry about various other laws as well, in which
true.
for which they are responsible to make sure that their organization does not fall off against any of the regulatory or the legal requirements. So whereas when we talk about the risk, yes, risk, or IT side, or individuals who are coming from the IT side, they are far better equipped
Okay.
to make sure that privacy concerns are addressed.
So, Pranibhai, this is the last question. I'm sorry for that. Sorry for extension.
No
This is
worries,
the
no
last
worries.
question. So, Pranibhai, I have seen a lot of content you're making on the risk and all that. So, if you want to suggest some write-ups, materials, if someone want to make a career in a risk, because that is also a good career. It's a game of thought process. So, what is the last suggestion you have for the people who want to make a career in a risk, like risk manager, risk professionals, GRC, and all that? I'm sorry, I'm just it's a one of
No,
the question received by one of the subscriber, because I also did the survey of that. Okay, we have a risk specialist who going to conduct this session, and Mr. Muneeb is the one who's doing this. So they raised this question to me. If possible, Prabh, can you just ask them? So if someone want to
yeah,
make a
so
career, yeah,
you see, again, I feel especially those individuals who are working, who want to work towards the GRC side, they have to have the appetite and the stamina to perform, to do extensive reading. If they don't have this, then I'm afraid that it can, because in GRC you have to understand the corporate governance and not just the governance related to privacy or information security. If you understand only the information security governance or the data privacy governance, your horizon might be very narrow, but having a broader understanding of about IT governance and the enterprise governance, it further, it broadens your horizon.
okay,
So those individuals who want to come towards this field, they should have really good stamina to continuously read. And again, even in the privacy, the as we mentioned that the individuals are either coming from the legal background or from the technical background. Individuals who are from the legal background, they usually have the stamina to do extensive reading and writing as well, because they
true,
have to write detailed laws and their verdicts
yeah,
as well. uh, it all depends that from, so let's say if you're talking about the information security GRC side or data privacy side, you see there are various certifications available out there.
yeah,
C-risk is one of them.
yeah,
Okay, and then it needs to be further, and then you have to, so C-risk offers a more generic understanding of
true,
the risk management. Okay, but if you want to further iron out those areas, then you will have to go into details and understand how, what are the, how that risk management is being operationalized
mm,
through ISO 27005. Okay, and
yeah,
then you have to see that, okay, how it's covered in the standard related to ISO
22000,
27701 or ISO 27001. Okay, then again, it's a the idea is to iron out your own gaps. Okay, but you can begin with the C risk, and then you have to see that, okay, and this is exactly what I did. This is what I did, that once I did my CISSP, I felt that CISSP gave me a lot of information. It had really opened up my eyes. I had a lot of information, and I knew I was operating in that space, but I never realized, okay, that what was the rationale behind doing certain things. But I figured out that CISSP gave me a lot of information. And there's a saying associated with CISSP. You would know this as well, that CISSP is a mile wide and an
an
inch
inch deep,
deep. But I realized that in order to be a subject matter expert on various areas, I need to pursue the relevant certifications for that. So
true,
for cloud security, I went towards CCSP. For risk management, I went towards the C risk. And for governance, I went towards ISO 27001 and ISO 27701. This is how you iron out your areas. Once I had
okay,
done this, I figured out that, look, that in order to implement information security, you need to understand IT governance as well. So then I
exactly.
looked at, okay, what are the IT governance frameworks that are available in the market?
That's
So
a
they are
very good
very
piece of
they're
advice. Yeah,
so then I went towards to understand the COBIT, and so this is how I've ironed out my areas. And besides that, see, certifications are one aspect. So another thing is that you still need to do a lot of study back, and just like usually the lawyers do. Okay, because and again, if your purpose is to make sure that your organization, if you are able to serve the future needs of your country or your organization, if that's the purpose, then you really have to do a continuous, you have to be on that journey of continuously upgrading yourself and equipping yourself with the upcoming challenges.
that's a great point. That's a great point. Thanks, Munib bhai, for taking out the time and sharing one of the best sessions. I really found this session is one of the will be a very useful session for the aspirants because I myself was searching for the content on privacy risk assessment. Even you can also check in YouTube. You will find a very limited content on that. I'm sure this content will be very useful. And the last part, what we have covered about the risk transformations in your career and all that, that was something is a eye opening for at least for me, because the way you have discussed about the topology and the mind map was just amazing. I truly appreciate about your content and your knowledge for this area.
Thank you,
So,
Prab.
so team, this is all from our side, and thank you for watching this video. And if you're new to the channel, do subscribe to the channel, and do let me know in the comment box, do you want Muneeb bhai again on this particular show and discuss more about the risk and other things? So we are waiting in our comment sections, and I will also share Muneeb bhai LinkedIn profile. So the best thing is that he do lot of mentoring in terms of supports and all that, and so you can reach out to him for the further supports and all that. Okay, thank you for watching this video. Good day. Bye.